Welcome to the chapter of Managing Careers. In this chapter, we'll talk about how HRM practices are helping employees to manage their careers. Just a brief overview where we are right now. So we started with basic HRM practices and we talked about a strategic HRM. Then we had a chapter regarding HR planning and job analysis. Then we talk about recruitment. Then we talk about selection, socialization, and now career management. So how those things are linked up. So this timeline kind of showing you that how organizations basically move from basic HRM practices towards more strategic view of the HRM. Then HR basically involves in planning and job analysis. Based upon the planning and job analysis, there's a whole process of recruitment. Then the selection takes place. Then employees are engaged into the socialization process. That also had the training and development component in it. And then we moved towards the managing career or career management. So while talking about the job and career, I thought that it is best to have a little bit overview or a little bit comparison that what is the difference between a job and career. So this diagram basically tells you that what is the difference between a job and career. So if you just looked at the job that is like blue in color and the career that is in green in color, so we see that job is basically short-term focused. However, career basically sees or is a long-term pursuit. Again, money is kind of a common between a job and career, but career is not just based on money. So there are also different considerations in a career. For example, job can be just small focused, short-term focused, and the focus is made on money or earning a living, something like that. However, at the same time, career has a long-term goal. So for example, you need different kinds of skills, different kinds of training, different kinds of education for developing a whole career. So for example, how can we differentiate in terms of that? What are a couple of jobs and a couple of careers that we see in a daily life? For example, if somebody is a gas station attendant, I'm not saying that this is not a good job or something, but it is more like a job per se, which a person is doing for living their earnings. However, if we just look at an architecture or architect or a writer or a musician or a teacher or a doctor or a software engineer, those kinds of job that we do for a longer period of time, that they becomes a career. So this is the difference between a job and a career. However, just thinking all those things in our mind, we'll have to look at that how HRM practices are helping employees to fulfill in their jobs as well, but at the same time, how these practices are shaping employees' career, that comes under the umbrella of career management. So what we have studied so far is more like career is a pattern of work-related experiences. So for example, a work-related experiences that basically accumulates over the span of the course of life of an employee, that becomes a career in itself. So for example, taking an example of a doctor or a teacher. So if you just see that if a teacher works for 25 years of his life or her life in a teaching profession, that becomes a career in itself. Again, the basic question would be, are the careers only paid or unpaid as well? So for example, careers can go both ways. It can be paid, definitely you need money for living. However, there are a couple of careers that an employee or a worker or a person has that are basically unpaid as well. So for example, couple of practices that we do for our social lives are basically unpaid. There are lots of unpaid volunteer careers as well. For example, a good example that is coming in my mind at this time is of Bill Gates. He already enjoyed a 25 to 30 years of experience of career in Microsoft. He builds up an empire. However, right now, whatever he is doing, basically it's a second career in itself. He's spending his money into the research and development of things that can help humanities. Another example that I can take of is President Obama. So he had a good career in politics, but now he's working on his foundations. Basically, that foundation is again working for some kind of humanitarian work. So at this time, if we just look at their career, the examples of both careers, those careers are unpaid in this time span. So careers can be both paid and unpaid. Another question that comes in the mind is, what is career development and what is training development? If we just looked at career development and training development, there are a couple of things that we need to look at. So for training development, if we talk about training development per se, there is always a time span that is involved in training and career. So for example, training and development must be really short term or kind of intermediate term. However, when we talk about the career development, it's more about the career ladder, progression of the career. So that approach in itself is a long-term approach. So I would say training and development, a short term or an intermediate term. Career development is more like a long-term approach, long-term focused. We are talking about 5 years, 10 years, or 25 years of a span of employees' work. So I think the basic difference would be a time period. When we talk about career development, we have two kinds of lenses to look at it. So for example, if we look career development in terms of organizational point of view, then career development is all about developing the career ladders, helping employees who just came after the socialization process have a step-by-step process where they can see their career ladders. They know how they can achieve some aspects of their career, how they can achieve one goal and how they can move to another goal, and then they can just go towards that career ladder. Again, what are the milestones in employees' careers that basically organization tracks? So these are the things that are important for organizational point of view. And most importantly, giving opportunities to employees so that they can develop their careers. Most of the research shows that employees try to be in that organization where they think that there is opportunity for developing their careers. Again, from the individual point of view, as I already mentioned, that employees try to be in that organization where they can have the opportunity to develop their careers. So for example, employees try to identify the goals which they can achieve, like in terms of step by step, that can lead to their career success. A common saying in today's world is that one must take care or must take the responsibility of managing their own careers. So one must be so much self-directed in terms of career development, so that if somehow organization doesn't have the finances to support employees' career, one should be taking responsibility of his or her own career. Again, if we see a broader perspective that what the career development is for organization, what is the value for career development from the organizational point of view. If we talk about that, we know that organizations are always hunting for talent. So there is always talk about talent retention, talent development in management or HR literature. So HRM is basically focusing on how to develop or how to manage our talent. So career development from an organizational point of view, definitely talent development and talent retention. Again, the second point, that organization should have an ability to attract or retain talent. So for example, if you're not giving as an organization, if I am not getting an opportunity to develop myself, and if I cannot see myself from today's time to the next 5 years or 10 years, I think so I won't be able to sustain or retain or be in that organization. So the organization should have an ability to not to just attract but retain the employees as well. So in terms of retaining the employees, definitely an organization need a solid career development program. Again, in terms of ethical perspective, organization should have the career development plan for everyone. So as we say, equal opportunities for everyone without the consideration of minorities or people in color or women per se. All of the employees in terms of organizational lens should be equal. So there should be equal opportunities available for career development for everyone. Again, what helps organization? So for example, if there is less distraction in terms of the whole career development plan, then it leads to reduction of employee frustration. So employees will be less frustrated when they have a straight career development plan. So for example, they know that this is where I am today, this is where I will be in next 2 years, this is where I will be in next 5 years, and then so on and so forth. So just take an example of a salesman. So for example, a person should know that in a world of sales, where would be I lie in the next 5 years. So for example, when I will become a zonal manager, when I become a territory manager, and again when I become a national sales manager. So these are the career plans that one organization should give to its employees that are basically involved in sales, and for that matter to everyone. Career development should have cultural diversity as well. So as we already talked about minorities and women and people of color, so organization career development plan should have the cultural diversity in a way that everyone should be a cultural competent, and that cultural competency would be not just organizational culture. It can be, for example, if I want my team member or my employees to work on a global workspace, so that person or that team should have a cultural competency of that particular environment as well. So for example, if I want someone to work in Brazil, so that person should know most of the things about the Brazil as well, that how the world of work works in Brazil. Again, the career development basically promotes organizational goodwill. A good example that we can see is of Google. So for example, Google is involved in a way that it promotes organizational goodwill for Google as well. Also, from the individual point of view, I would say that there are two kinds of lenses from where we can observe the value of career development from the individual point of view. So for example, there is an external career success which everybody sees. So for example, one needs a progression of hierarchy. So for example, if I am a junior manager today, I just want to become a mid-manager in like 2 to 3 years or 5 years. Or I want to become a senior manager or a national manager in 10 years time, 20 years time. So that is basically a progress of hierarchy that is from the external lens. And this is a kind of success or career success that everybody is basically seeing. I need that. Again, in terms of occupation. So for example, some occupations are kind of regarded as well developed occupation, or there is a different set of value for one profession. So for example, if we just look at in terms of physicians or doctors or teachers or professors, these are kind of occupations that are kind of well regarded in everyone's eye. So there is also an external lens of looking at them. Again, a long-term commitment, as I think so we already talked about in terms of career. Career is always a long-term commitment. So there is no short-term focus for career. Whenever we are talking about career, it is about the same or related work experience in one's lifespan. So it could be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. So that kind of commitment one wants from the individual lenses. Again, an income. This is also an important criteria in terms of judging this career success. How much one is earning. So for example, how much you're making. That's what we basically say to each other whenever we are talking, whenever we are talking like informally with each other. So these are basically the career success, or I would say the markers of career success from the external point of view. However, there's also something that a person needs from internal. For example, there's also some sort of internal career satisfaction, and that comes from achievement of personal goals. So for example, if I have one personal goal and if I achieve that, for example, in 2 years time, 3 years time, this is also some kind of internal success or internal criteria of judging success. That is one thing. And the most important thing, it is about meaningfulness of one's work. What we call, what is work itself? What is my work related to me? How much importance will I give to the work itself? Because once I have that kind of criteria, once I looked at career success or my career in a way, then the external criteria has less importance. So for example, maybe if I look at career from the internal lens, maybe the meaningfulness of one's work will be more rather than an income itself. So sometimes these things are also important. Again, why do we care about the external or internal criteria in terms of judging the career success? One of the most important thing is about to motivate the employees. The manager or the leader who is managing or leading the organization if he or she knows that which employee can be motivated from which criteria, then I think so that half of that person's work is done. So for example, if one of the employees is basically looking at the career from the internal lens, that person is basically looking for the meaningfulness of work. So the manager should give the important task to those people, the task that is much more related to the career success of one's employee, and that could lead to the success of organization as a whole. So one should give that kind of opportunity to the employees who are looking for internal career successes, and the vice versa for the external successes as well. Again, so an important point here is that how employees can have a good career plan. Okay, what are the tools and techniques or anchors or managers or leaders or workers or co-workers that support employees to make their career a successful career? Two most important things that we talked about in HR literature in general, but specifically in HRD literature. We call it mentors or coaches. So I'll talk about a little bit about the mentoring and coaching as well. So who are mentors and who are coach? So mentors are typically senior level managers. So mentors are senior level managers that are basically taking care of the junior employees. Mentors, senior level managers taking care of the junior employees in terms of enhancing their growth. What they are just concerned for, that they are trying to set up a path for their junior employees. What they are doing at the moment is that they are paving the way for their junior employees. What they are basically telling their junior employees, definitely a small thing, if it's just for training, the trainer can do the job. However, the mentors are basically helping employees to develop their professional network. So for example, they're helping their employees or their junior employees or their junior colleagues that how basically the world of work works. What is the organizational politics? How this organization works? How the work can be done? And also in terms of all those things, at the same time they are trying to provide the feedback, the necessary feedback that is important for that employee. A necessary feedback that is important for their employee. So I would say that's more like a cyclic process, that it revolves in a cycle. So the mentor observe the junior employee, analyze the work, what he or she is doing, and then try to improve that work by giving the necessary feedback. This is the most important thing, to give the feedback so that the employees know what are the things or what are the tasks or activities that I should not do. Again, I talked about the mentors, but what is the difference between mentoring and coaching? Okay, in the extant literature, in the more depth, maybe you will find a couple of differences between a mentor and a coach. So there are three characteristics on which we can differentiate between mentors and coaches. So for example, in terms of relationships, the relationship between a mentor and a mentee is more like informal. So for example, We are talking about informal relationships in terms of, we are just not talking about the work itself. We are talking about how the work is being done. So for example, what are the internal policies and procedures that can help any employee to get their work done? What are the organizational politics? What are the best way of doing work? Is it the only way of doing work, or you can do your work in different ways? So for example, there's one hard way of doing anything, and then there's a smart way of doing something. So the mentors is basically telling their mentees a smart way of doing things as well. So I would say that they are also developing the soft skills of their mentee. It's not just the work itself, but all the soft skills that comes within that time frame. However, the coaches are more structured and formal relationship. So they'll just talk about the work, how you can do this work, and this is one way of doing their work. So coaches is more structured and formal process. In terms of duration of the process between mentor and mentee, so I would say the mentoring is more like a long-term process. So for example, someone can be a mentor to me for another 5 years or 10 years. Because if you just see what I said a little bit while ago, that mentoring is not just telling someone that how this work is done. It's more about telling the politics of the organization as well. It's more about developing the soft skills into the mentee. So when you're developing the soft skills of your mentee, it will take time. So mentoring is much more a longer term process. So the focus is long term. However, coaching is a short term process. So for example, this is the thing that I am, this is the project that I am on, this is the thing that I cannot do, this is a weakness in me, or this is the shortcoming, or this is the area where I need a training. So the coaching is basically to develop that particular area where I am weak. That's it. Again, efficiency in development is also one of the criteria where we can differentiate a mentor and a coach. Mentoring is directly about the continuous development. So I think so we just talked about the time frame, we talked about the soft skills. So it's about the continuous development. So for example, one needs their mentee to develop in a continuous way. It's not the one-time process. It's not that we just want to gain a personal efficiency or efficiency in that way. We are trying to develop that employee in a way that they can become someone after 5 years, after 10 years. So this is a slow process, I would say, but a continuous process where a mentee needs a continuous points as well. So for example, there should be continuous check-in points where one should know that how I am doing. It's not like coaching that you have one task, you develop me in that task, then you evaluate me up on this task, and that's it. Mentoring as a whole is a different ball game in itself. So it is informal, long-term, continuous.